All right, so we'll say good morning. Let's begin. So today's daf is daf Yud. We left off yesterday on daf Tesamud Beis. So the Gemara said the following. The Gemara said, Rabbi Shimon ben Asya Omer. So the third line down. Rabbi Shimon ben Asya said, what's an example of something that is bent, something that is crooked, that cannot be fixed? Haba ala erva, one who goes ahead and has relations with someone who is an erva. V'holid mimena mamzer, and the person goes ahead and creates a mamzer as a result. Such an individual ultimately etzem uva shenu yachal liskon. So the Gemara says the following. The Gemara says, hold it in la, hold it low. Now it makes it sound like the only time that there's a problem with mamzerus is when lemaisa again. There's the only problem when it's considered to be something that is crooked, that cannot be made straight, is only when a mamzer was born, meaning when you created a mamzer. So the Gemara says, is that true? V'hatanya, we learned, Rabbi Shimon ben Asya says, Gonev Adam, Efshar sheyachzir ginava. So we'll say if a person steals something, the possibility is they can return that which has been stolen, v'yitakin, and they have the ability to fix their sin. Gozel Adam, person stole, remember we saw Geneva and Gazela yesterday. So a person goes ahead and steals something again with, Gozel means they steal it with force. Gozel Adam, Efshar sheyachzir gazlo, v'yitakin, person steals, it's possible that they could go ahead and return that which has been stolen and fix and remedy their mistake. Avahaba al ishes ish. But Rabbi say if somebody chas v'shalom goes ahead and has relations with a married woman v'asra lebayla and prohibits her to her husband, nitrad min ha'olam v'halachlo. Such a person ultimately is removed from the world and they're lost. They're lost. So Rabbi say, what do you see? Rabbi Yochai, let's finish up. Rabbi Shimon Yochai says, Ein Omer Bikru Gamal, Bikru Chazir. We'll say again, it's an interesting expression. We don't say that you should examine a camel to see if it's fit to be a carbon, and we don't say you should examine a pig to see if it's fit to be a carbon, because those items are obviously precluded and excluded from the area of carbonos. Ella Bikru Tala. But rather, what we do say is go ahead and check the lamb to see if it's fit to be used for a carbon. I will say what is Rabbi Shimon Yochai is saying is that lemaisa, we only go ahead and only something that was technically fit, from the beginning is examined to see its level of fitness. But something that was never in the parsha of being fit, so what Rabbi Shimon Yochai is alluding to is what he said in the Mishnah, that the only thing that could be crooked is what? Is something that was, the only thing that could be straight is something that was, the only thing that can become crooked is something that was originally straight. But if it was never originally straight, then it doesn't have the capacity to become crooked. So the Gemara says, what's an example? This is the Talmid Chacham shepirish min Torah. This is the Talmid Chacham, ultimately again, who's separated from the ways of the Torah. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish says, Kol Talmid Chacham shepirish min Torah. Any Talmid Chacham who separates himself from the Torah. I love Hakasuv Omer, about him the pasuk says, Kitzipor no dedes min kana. Kain ish no date mimkoma. We'll say a very beautiful statement. Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish says, any time Chacham that separates from the Torah, about him the pasuk says, like a bird that wanders away from its nest, so is a man who wanders away from his place. Va'omer mamatzu avoseichem bi'avel ki racha kume alai. And furthermore, the pasuk is HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, when we distance ourselves from him, what iniquity, what negative thing have your forefathers found in me that they have chosen to distance themselves from me? So we'll say the point we have is a kasha, because here, according to this brisa, the Gemara explains that a mu'uvas shenayuchal liskon, something that is crooked that cannot be made straight, is an example of someone who commits adultery. Now, the Gemara of the brisa over here does not indicate anything about a mamzer, so it sounds like again it even refers just to the act of adultery itself. Yet our Mishnah seems to indicate that the only crookedness that cannot be made straight is the actual birth of the mamzer. To which the Gemara says, Lo kasha. Kan ba'achoso pnuye kan ba'eshes ish. The Gemara says, you're right, it depends. The Mishnah is talking about a case where a person chas v'shalom engaged in an act of incest with his single sister. And again, Abosai, in a case like that, the only, so to speak, lasting ramification of that act would be if it produced a mamzer. As opposed to if a person commits adultery, even in the absence of a mamzer, at the end of the day, that forbidden act has ramifications, and that a woman becomes prohibited to her husband. The other possibility is hava eshes ish. Both cases, the Mishnah and the Brayz could be referring to when one commits adultery. V'lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. Kan ba'ones, kan beratzon. That the Mishnah could be talking about a situation where ultimately, again, a woman was violated. If she was violated again, then she does not become prohibited to her husband. And therefore, the only quote-unquote lasting impact of that act would be, the only crookedness that would not be able to be fixed would be if a mamzer was born, versus the brisa that's talking about, again, a case where it was baratzon. If it was baratzon, if she was a willing partner to this, then lemaisa, there is a lasting impact of this negative act, namely that she becomes prohibited to her husband. V'bay sema, hava haba ones, or both cases could be talking about where she was violated. V'lo kasha, kan be'eshes kohen, kan be'eshes Yisrael. So the Mishnah could be talking about a case of an eshes kohen, or I should say, excuse me, the brisa is talking about a case of an eshes kohen, and therefore, again, even in the absence of a mamzer being born, if an eshes kohen is violated, she becomes prohibited to her husband. However, again, the Mishnah could be talking about a case of an eshes Yisrael, where in the absence of a mamzer, she's permitted to her husband afterwards. And there is no crookedness that cannot be straightened. So the Gemara says, "Uliyotze ulavo ein shalom." So we'll say again, the Gemara quotes over here the pasuk from Zechariah: "To he who leaves and comes back, there is no peace." Amarav, we'll say, what does this mean? Or he who goes back and forth, there is no peace. Amarav, Kevin sheyatza adam midvar halacha lidvar mikra shuven l'shabbat. It's a very interesting Gemara. As soon as a person leaves, Dvar Halacha, learning Halacha, to go back and learn Dvar Mikra literally means like Chumash, like Tanakh, a person finds no peace. And I was saying, what does it mean that a person finds no peace? Look at Rashi. Sheyotzi adam midvar halacha ledvar mikra shuvein l'shalom she'ein hora'a midvar mikra shamishna mefarsha stimas haTorah. I will say, in other words, the beauty of learning Halacha is what? That a person knows what to do. If you don't know halacha, then you don't know what to do. I mean, I think we do a lot of guesswork, right? We make educated and informed guesses, but the truth is, very often in life, we actually don't know what we're doing simply because we don't know the halachas that govern certain situations. So there's a very fulfilling piece to learning halacha, because a person actually doesn't just absorb knowledge, but a person ultimately absorbs knowledge about how to properly live. So if a person goes ahead and stops learning halacha and instead goes to learn Tanakh, it's very interesting, it's very riveting, it's very intriguing, but ultimately it's not going to be as fulfilling as the learning of halacha. A person won't find peace. Shmuel says, Zaporesh mi Talmud l'Mishnah. Shmuel says this refers to someone who leaves the learning of Talmud to go to learn Mishnah. I will say, what does the Gemara mean when the Gemara says Talmud? The Gemara says kind of like, well, not obviously in the form that we have, but Talmud was discussions of the Mishnayos. So someone who goes ahead and stops learning Gemara to go back and learn Mishnah will also not feel fulfilled. Why? Because Mishnah is a series of statements that are often not fully explained. It's the Gemara where ultimately, again, one is able to kind of dissect and take apart the different Mishnaic statements to understand what they truly mean. So you see the pattern over here is that the Gemara is saying that if you go from almost like a rich, intellectually stimulating, fulfilling lemaisa limud to something that is a little bit more technical, and perhaps not as immediately lemaisa, it's not as fulfilling. Interestingly enough, Rabbi Yochanan says, afilu mishas l'shas. Even if you go from one order of the Talmud or one Talmud to the other, a person won't have that same level of fulfillment. So it's interesting. According to Rashi understands this to mean that if a person stops learning Shas Yerushalmi and starts learning Shas Bavli, Shehu Amok. So the Gemara says that ultimately, again, Shas Yerushalmi is deeper than Shas Bavli, bless you. And then again, if a person stops learning, Shas Bavli, Shas Yerushalmi, to learn Shas Bavli, they'll also lack a certain level of fulfillment. Okay. I'm sorry? The Yerushalmi Daf Yomi. Right? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's such a thing as Yerushalmi Daf Yomi, but you could start it out. All right?
As opposed to learning Gemara.
Yeah, correct. Again, I will say, I want to point out, the Gemara is not going ahead and stating halacha l'maisa. The Gemara is quoting an opinion over here. So there's this opinion that, look, there's another school of thought. The other school of thought says, Ein adam lomed ela mashali b'chafetz. People learn that which they're interested in. So at the end of the day, it's not, the concept of fulfillment and learning is not an objective statement. It's a very subjective statement. So a person might say, for some people, so learning halacha just doesn't, let me say it this way. Everyone has to know halacha. You can't be properly Jewish without knowing halacha, because otherwise it's like practicing law without a license. But I think a lot of people do that. No, I'm saying it's like there are certain things that you have to have training in order to be able to do it. So the truth is you have to know halacha. I mean, we spend our lifetime trying to figure this stuff out. But again, so the Gemara feels over here that which is lemaisa, that which is practical, and that which actually allows you to live your day-to-day life is the most fulfilling. But on the other hand, very often people don't find it fulfilling, and people find the other things that perhaps inspire a little bit more, teach them other moral, ethical messages a little bit more. So the point is the Gemara advances arguments both ways. Says the Mishnah. I'm sorry? From Shas, right. This is Machlokes Rashi and Tosas. So the Mishnah says the following: Heter Nedarim Parchin Ba'avir. I will say now, very interesting Gemara. Literally, Heter Nedarim means the revocation and annulment of vows. Revocation and annulment of vows, Parchin Ba'avir, literally is suspended in midair. Ve'ein lehem amashe yismechu, and have nothing to rely on. I will say, when the Mishnah makes us say what the Mishnah is saying is like this: is that there's virtually nothing written in the Torah about revocation of vows. Now, we're going to challenge that in just a little bit. That's what it means when it says Parchin Ba'avir, means there's this whole body of halacha, but yet most of it is in Torah Sheba'al Peh, and very little of it is in Torah Shebechsav. Hilchos Shabbos Chagigos V'Mi'ilos, Harehem Ka'ararim Hatluin B'Sara. The laws of Shabbos, the laws of Chagigah, and I will say we're assuming right now the laws of Chagigah mean Karban Chagigah, laws of Mi'ilah, which means inappropriate mundane use of consecrated property. These are like mountains that are suspended by a hair. What does that mean? Shein mikra muat, because there's very little in Torah Shebechsav, very little in the Torah, in the Psukim, that discuss it. V'halachos merubos, and yet there is a voluminous amount of material in Torah Sheba'al Peh that discusses it. Hadinin, so I will say dinin means monetary law, dine mamanis, v'ha'avodos, and sacrificial law, hataros, v'atmeos, v'atamos, the laws of tum and tara, v'arayos, and the laws of morality or immorality. Yesh lahen amash yismechu. There is much text for which they can be supported, the hein gufei Torah, and these things really make up the bulk of Torah. So we'll say, what the Gemara is essentially saying is, there are certain things, everything's important, but it's interesting that there are certain things that the Torah barely discusses, and that we rely heavily on Torah Sheba'al Peh. There are certain things that are mentioned heavily within Torah Shebechsav, and are more explicit in the text. Says the Gemara Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yesh Lahen Amashi Yismechu. So we'll say, remember, the first thing Gemara began with was the statement that Heter Nedarim, the whole idea of revocation and annulment of vows, is something that there is virtually nothing written in the Torah about it. So now the Bryce says, Rabbi Eliezer says, what are you talking about? It's written in the Torah, Shene Emar, Ki Yafli. I will say, because again, the Torah states, V'dabra b'nei Yisrael martalem ish kiyafli neder be'erkach nefashos. Dabra b'nei Yisrael martalem ish o isha kiyafli lindor neder. We have this lashon of kiyafli twice. Right now, kiyafli literally means when one articulates, when one ultimately says something. So the Gemara says, why does it say kiyafli twice? Shtei pamim, 2 times. Achas hafla le'iser, v'achas hafla leheter. One, to teach you that l'maisa you could articulate a neder to make it binding upon you, and you could articulate an idea again. What is that?
Turn that off.
Oh, okay. No, it's okay. I just good. I just didn't know what it was. So the Gemara said the following. So one is to articulate a neder when you first make it, and one is to try to remember in order to get out of a neder, you have to be able to articulate certain reasons. Again, either why you would not have made it in the first place, or that certain new realities perhaps came to light. So the Gemara is understanding over here that it says yafli, articulate, enunciate twice. One to teach you that you get into the neder through your speech, and one to teach you that what? That you could exit the neder through your speech as well. Rabbi Yeshua says, Yesh lamashi yismechu. There are psukim upon which we could base the laws of revocation of vows. Because what does the pasuk say? Shnei Emar, Asher nishbati biapi. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I have sworn in my anger, nishbati v'chazarti bi. That I've sworn in my anger, and therefore, again, what we can infer from that is that lemaisa, Kadosh Baruch Hu is kiviyachol saying, because I swore in my anger, I could technically what? I could technically get out of that neder as well. Since it was made in such an emotionally charged state, I could technically get out of it as well. Nishpati bi'api v'chazarti bi. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Sosai. Now, all we're doing now is quoting a whole bunch of opinions that show that the concept of revocation of vows can be found in the Torah. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Yesh lamash yismechu shenemar kol nedivli bo. This is interesting. That Rabbi say we're in Parshas Truma. So the Torah discusses that who donated to the Mishkan, kol nedivli bo, any person who had generosity of spirit. So Rashi points out, what do you see from here? That you're only obligated to give as long as you maintain that generosity of spirit. But should that generosity of spirit go by the wayside, then what? You would have the opportunity to get out of your vow. Chananya ben Achi Rabbi Yoshua, Chananya, the son of the brother of Yoshua, says, Yesh lamash yismechu, that revocation of vows has what to rely on. Shne'emar nishpati va'akaima lishmar mishpatei tzidkecha. Literally, I have sworn to uphold the mishpatei tzidkecha, your statutes of justice. Rashi says, nishpati va'akaima lishmar mishpatei tzidkecha medikamer va'akaima. The fact that it says, I swore and I will uphold, indicates to us what? The imratza shalakaim atirnas. Meaning, it could have just said, nishpati I have sworn to uphold the tenets of your righteousness. The fact that it says, I have sworn and will uphold, indicates that what? That under certain circumstances, you could get out of that obligation to uphold. So there's a remiss to the concept of heter nedarim. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Ihavikas hasam. Rabbi Yehuda's name is Shmuel. If I was there when this discussion was happening, Amri Luhu, I would have said to them, Didi adifu mididaichu. I have a proof that is better than all of your proof. Shena Emar, because the pasuk says, Lo yachel dvaro. The pasuk says, his word shall not become profane. Who? Eino meichel. I may not profane my word if I make a neder. Aval achirim mochlin lo. But others could go ahead and what? Others can go ahead and profane, so to speak, and revoke my word for me. So I'll say here you just have multiple suggestions about the source for heter nidarim from the Torah. So Amar Rava says, "L'kulu islu pirchel bar midishmol." Rava says the truth is all of these proofs can be refuted with the exception of Shmuel's. There's no refutation. So now the Gemara goes back and refutes all of them. Di'i mid Rabbi Eliezer, because if you go back to Rabbi Eliezer, Dilma Rabbi Yehuda. Also, remember again, Rabbi Eliezer was the first opinion. Rabbi Eliezer said, Kiyafli twice. Maybe Kiyafli twice teaches us, like Rabbi Yehuda, who's sending Rabbi Tarfon, the Sanya. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Yehuda sending Rabbi Tarfon, Li'olam ein echad mehem nazir, shlom nitna naziros ela lahafla. Also, listen to this. Rashi brings down an interesting case. So let's say Reuven and Shimon are sitting on the street corner, and Levi's walking down, and they say to themselves like this. Reuven says, if Levi, who did I say? If Levi, right? Levi's the guy number 3. Levi's walking down the street, so Reuven says, if Levi's a Nazir, I'm a Nazir just like him. Okay? And Shimon says, if Levi's not a Nazir, I'm a Nazir just like him. So I will say, don't ask why. It doesn't matter, right? The point is they're bored. They're sitting on the corner, right? So whatever on the stoop, right? They're sitting on the stoop, right? On the overturned milk crates, and they're just So what? So we'll say, so the halacha is we paskin. Actually, I should say Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon says, Rabbi Yehuda Tarfon, that is not a good neder naziros, meaning that neither of them are a nazir. Why? Because Kiyafli teaches us that in order to become a nazir, you must make an explicit articulation. I am a nazir. Making these two-sided or potential statements does not make you a nazir. So the point is, also we see that Kiyafli is necessary to teach us another limud. Therefore, it doesn't teach us heter nedarim. Okay, Imed Rabbi Yoshua. And if you want to go back to Rabbi Yoshua, remember what did Rabbi Yoshua say? Rabbi Yoshua was the opinion who said, Asher nishbati bi'api. I have sworn in my anger, which Rabbi Yoshua interpreted to mean that Lamaisa, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to get out of his oath, so to speak, he could say, I did it in anger, and therefore it's not binding. So the Gemara says, Dilma hachi kamar ba'api nishbati. Or perhaps what God was really saying was, I swore in my anger, and therefore, velo hadranabi, and therefore again, I will not retract it. So therefore, it's not a good proof. Imid Rabbi Yitzchak. If we go with the proof of Rabbi Yitzchak, what did Rabbi Yitzchak say? Rabbi Yitzchak said, Kol nedivli bo. kol nediv libo, which indicates that again, should a person's generosity begin to wane, that a person would be able to get out of their vow. Dilma la'afuki mid Shmuel. Perhaps that pasuk is coming to exclude the position of Shmuel. Damar Shmuel, Gamar belibo. That Rabbi say, even if what, if a person decided in their heart that they want to give tzedakah. Rashi says, Shvua o neder o hekdish. Person makes an oath, a vow, or a hekdish. It's not enough to promise in your heart. Tsar shiyotzi bisvasav. You have to actively articulate it with your mouth. V'hakamash, perhaps what we learn from this pasuk is what? Da'af agav de lahotzi bisvasav. That perhaps, again, kol nediv libo teaches us what Rabbi say, that even though I did not explicitly articulate my vow, as long as I thought it, it is binding. And if we from the statement of Chananya, the son of the brother Rabbi Yoshua, remember what did Chananya say? So Chananya was the one who said, which one was it? Nishpati v'akayema. Right, so I'm gonna find that pasuk. Nishpati Nishpati is quoting over here from the pasuk in Tehillim. Nishpati va'akayema lishmar mishpatei tzidkecha. Dilma Krav Gidol Amarav. The Amarav Gidol Amarav. Minayin shenishba'in lekaimis hamitzvah. Rabbi say, how do we know that I could take an oath to go ahead and fulfill a mitzvah? Rabbi say, this is an interesting discussion by itself about taking an oath to do something that you are already obligated to do. But how do we know that it's permitted to go ahead and take an oath to perform a mitzvah as a way of being mechazik, as a way of ultimately strengthening and bolstering my mitzvah observance? Shene'emar, because the pasuk says, Nishpati va'akayema lishmar mishpatei tzidkecha. Okay. Ela dishmuel les lupircha. So we'll say, therefore we see that out of all the proofs that we brought, the only one that does not have a pircha, that does not have a refutation, and when we say refutation, it's not that we're refuting these, it's that we're saying that all of these psukim are used to teach us other concepts. So because of that, they're simply not available to teach us the concept of heter nedarim. So all of these have quote-unquote refutations, except for Shmuel's statement. Ela dishmuel les lupircha. So we'll say Shmuel's statement, what was so again? Shmuel's position was lo yachel devaro, right? He may not profane his word, but he may not do it. But others may go ahead and release him from his vow. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Avitim Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Haydu Darmi Inshi. This is Rabbi say Shmuel's statement is the only one that stands, and so Rava said. I'm sorry. Amar Rav Avitim Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Haydu Darmi Inshi. This is what people say. Tava chada pilpalta charifta. So you've seen this expression before. One sharp pepper is better than a basket of gourds. So apparently the gourds or melons, again, are not as sharp. But one sharp pepper has more kick than a whole basket of gourds. Okay, you could use that one. It is a good one. Right? So let's say again, even though, again, here you had all these opinions, but Lamais, again, it was only Shmuel who was able to advance the proof. Avi, you hear that one? One sharp pepper is better than a basket of gourds. Okay? You tell your Rebbe that one, I guarantee you. It's extra, he says. So the Gemara says the following. The Gemara goes right to Hilchos Shabbos. So, okay, remember, what's the next thing in the Mishnah? So the Mishnah says Hilchos Shabbos is another example of something for which, again, there is very little written in the Torah, in Torah Shebichsav, and a voluminous amount in Torah Shabbat. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Michtiv, Kasivan. The Torah talks about Hilchos Shabbos all the time, right? Torah tells us about not doing malacha on Shabbos. What we're talking about is some of the specific halachos of Shabbos. For example, hachofer guma b'Shabbos was an interesting case. If somebody digs a hole on Shabbos, ve'in sarach ela la'afra, and I only need the dirt. Rashi says, chofer guma, bone binyan, who, v'im enot sarach ela litol esa afar, afa pisha binyan bano, in a chaim shema. Listen to this, I'll say. So normally, if you dig a pit, you can't dig a pit on Shabbos, because the mice, again, it's actually a form of bone, it's a form of construction. So therefore, again, but what happens if I don't need the pit? I need the dirt. So what's the halacha in such a situation? So the halacha is I'm potter. Why am I potter? Because the Gemara says, Kiman, Rabbi Shimon, Damar, Melacha shenetzricha legufa potter aleh. Because Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion that Rabbi said the only time you are chai for doing a malacha is when? Is if you're doing the malacha for the sake of the malacha. But if you're doing the malacha for some other purpose, so for example, again, the malacha of digging a pit is because I need the pit. If I'm doing it for the dirt, that's what's called a malacha shenetzricha legufa, a malacha that is not necessary for its primary purpose, and I'm potter. To which the Gemara says, by the way, I feel Rabbi Yehuda. The truth is, even Rabbi Yehuda, who normally says that even for a malacha shenetzricha legufa you'd be chayiv, would agree in this case that it's potter. Why? Because hasa mitakein hacha mekalkel. Because the act of digging a pit when you don't need the pit is what? Is a destructive act on Shabbos, and therefore lemaisa you are potter from any destructive act, only chayiv for constructive acts. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, my kaharin tatluyin b'sara. So what does it mean when we say the laws of Shabbos are like a what? Are like a mountain suspended by a hair? To which the Gemara answers, meleches machsheves asra Torah. Umeleches machsheves lo kasiva, because the pasuk says that you are only chayiv. Excuse me, the Torah says that you're only chayiv. The halacha says you're only chayiv for meleches machsheves. Rabbi say, what does meleches machsheves mean? Constructive malacha on Shabbos, and you are not chayiv for non-constructive malacha on Shabbos. Now, this, of course, is one of the guiding light principles of Hilchos Shabbos, that you are only chayiv on Shabbos for malacha if you do meleches machsheves. It's a guiding light principle. It's a cornerstone. And yet what? It's not written in the Torah. Look at Rashi. Meleches machsheves shamachshava chashva bedaito v'niskavila. So both say, first of all, meleches machsheves also means that a person has a premeditated das to be able to do something. And again, I will say this person's intention in the case of the digging of the hole for the dirt, his intention is not for building. Lefichach potter, and therefore again he's exempt. V'zehu remez muat, and I will say this is only alluded to in passing in the Torah. De'ilu meleches machsheves b'Shabbos lo kasiva ela b'mishkan u'dichsiv. I will say, interesting. Where do we learn the concept of meleches machsheves from? That again, that in order for you to be chayiv in malacha on Shabbos, it has to be again premeditated and constructive. It doesn't say meleches machsheves by Shabbos. Where does it meleches machsheves? By the Mishkan. But what? Ulafisha samach beparshas vayakel parsha Shabbos the parshas Mishkan on ulemeidim meleches machsheves Shabbos. But I also remember again, because of the juxtaposition of the Mishkan to Shabbos, we learn out a lot from one the other. So just like we learn out the 39 categories of labor, 39 malachas, amtes malachas from the Mishkan, we also learn out the concept of meleches machsheves from the Mishkan as well. So that's the point the Gemara means when it says it's like a mountain suspended by a hair. You have this incredible amount of Hilchos Shabbos, and where is it essentially? What is it all predicated on? It's predicated pretty much on one phrase, meleches machsheves. That's what? That's not even found by Shabbos. It's found by the Mishkan, but it's Gzeir Shava in Torah Shabbat that links the two. Chagigos. So the halachos of Chagigos, of Karbanos, are also, the Gemara says, are also like mountains suspended by a hair. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Michtav Kasivan. That's not true. The laws of Chagigos are written in the Torah, to which the Gemara answers, Lo tzricha lichida amar leira papa la abaye. As Rav Papa said to Abaye, what did Rav Papa say to Abaye? That mimai dahai v'chagosim also chag la'Hashem zvicha. How do you know that when the pasuk says v'chagosim also chag la'Hashem, you shall celebrate it as a chag to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And both say we assume that v'chagosim refers to what? Refers to Karban Chagigah. So you see over here that Karban Chagigah is written explicitly in the Torah. So Rav Papa said to Abaye, how do you know that v'chagosim refers to Karban Chagigah? Maybe Dilma chogu chaga ka'amar. Maybe what the pasuk is saying is what? Is that Lamaisa, a person should go ahead and just have a good time. Maybe the halacha is not that I have to bring a chagigah, but the halacha is that I have to celebrate like a Yom Tiv. Ela me'ata, if that's the case, dichsiv vayachogu li b'midbar. Again, I will say, when ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Paro that he's going to go ahead and celebrate for me in the desert. The Choshen Baruch Hu said it's going to be a celebration in the desert. Hachanami dechogu chagahu. You might think over there that it also doesn't mean karbanos, but perhaps ultimately it means. I'm sorry, it doesn't mean karbanos. It just means a Yom Tov, like a Chagigah, like just a celebration. Maybe you'll say that is indeed true. Again, remember, just to keep in mind what we're doing. The Mishnah said that the laws of Chagigah are not written explicitly in the Torah. They're just like a mountain suspended by a hair. The Gemara says that's strange because the pasuk says v'chagosim also chag laHashem, which seems to indicate that what? That lemaisa, that's the Karban Chagigah. To which the Gemara now is suggesting that maybe by v'chagosim also chag laHashem just means celebration, does not mean karbanos. The problem just is then when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to tell Moshe, to tell Paro v'yachogu li b'midbar, is that also just talking about a celebration? We assume that meant karbanos. Maybe we'll say it just means a celebration. But we learned Moshe said to Paro, Gam ata titim biyadenu zvachim va'olos. Paro, you will also give us zvachim va'olos, karbanos. Dilma hachi kama rachmana. Perhaps this is what the Torah means to say. Achlu ushesu v'chogu chaga. Kamai, I want you to go ahead and eat and drink and celebrate before me. The Gemara says, Lo sakadaitcha dichsiv, v'lo yolin chelev chagi ad boker. The pasuk says literally that the chelev of my chag, the chelev of my chagigah, shall not be left over until morning. V'is sakadaitcha dechugahu tarba lechaga islang. If you want to say that chagi just literally means my celebration, so what does that mean? Don't leave over the fats of my celebration until the morning. That can't be. V'dil mahaki kam rachmana. Perhaps this is what the Torah means to say. Chelev haba bizman chag lo yolin. That any chelev that's from karbanos that is brought during the times of the Yom Tov shall not be left over until the morning. The Gemara says that can't be. Elamei ata haba bizman chag kudulo yolin hadachal hashana kula yolin. Are you therefore trying to tell me that it's only the fats from karbanos that are brought during Yom Tov that you can't leave over, but fats from other karbanos you can leave over? We know that's not true. Kol halayla ad haboker. The Torah says by all karbanos that the fats can be left over throughout the night until the morning. To which the Gemara says, Dilma imeahu hava amina hahu la'aseh kazav rachmana. Perhaps if we were just learned that from that pasuk, I would have said the Torah is just coming to teach me that is an aseh, a positive commandment. And hai lilav, and the other pasuk is coming to teach me a lav, a prohibition. And therefore, if I leave over the fats until the morning, I'm in violation of both an aseh, a positive commandment, as well as what? As well as a lav. To which the Gemara says, kasav krachrina. Therefore, the Torah comes to therefore the Torah quotes the Torah states another pasuk. V'lo yolin min abasar asher tizbach be'erev bayom harishon laboker. Therefore, the pasuk says, "You shall not leave over from the meat that you offered in the evening on asher tizbach be'erev harishon laboker on the first day until the morning." V'dilma la'avar la b'shnei lavin v'aseh. Maybe the Torah is coming to teach you that if I leave over the fats, I'm in violation of two lavin, two prohibitions, and one positive commandment. Ela asya midbar. Rather, Abba say we learn out the Gzeir Sheva on midbar. Ksiv hacha, it says over here, vayachoguli b'midbar. This is what I will say. This is by Pesach. It says over here that you shall celebrate for me in the desert. Uksiv hasam hazvachim v'hamincha higashtem li b'midbar. It says over here in the pasuk. He's quoting over here the pasuk from Amos, that you will, the Zvachim and the Mincha, the Zevach, the Karbanos and the Mincha, you will bring close to me in the desert. Malahalon, just like by the pasuk in Amos, Zvachim, Afkan sotu v'yachoguli b'midbar, is also what? Is also talking about Karbanos. So we'll say again. So far, so what have we just proven? We've just proven first of all, vayachoguli b'midbar. The chag over there is referring to what? Is referring to Karbanos. If the chag over there is referring to Karbanos, then what? Then the chagosim also chag lashem is also referring to what? Karban Chagigah. So I'll say if that's the case, then we've just seen that Karban Chagigah is discussed explicitly in the text. If that's the case, says the Gemara, then my kaharin hatluim besara. So then, what does it mean when it says that the laws of Chagigah are like mountains suspended by a hair? Divrei Torah divrei Kabbalah lo yafin. Because remember, interestingly enough, the Gzeir Shava that allows us to interpret the word Chag as referring to Karban Chagigah is Gzeir Shava based on what? Gzeir Shava based on a pasuk in Navi. Generally, we don't learn out biblical law from the Nevi'im. We learn that from the Torah. So the fact that you have at least part of the limud based on a pasuk in Navi makes it like mountains that are suspended by a hair. Mi'ilos, the laws of Mi'ilah. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Michtav kasivan. The Torah discusses the laws of Mi'ilah. The Torah discusses it. So why do you say that it's like mountains suspended by a hair? Amray bar Chama, lo nitzucha el lechidisnan. It's necessary only for the following which is stated. Hashaliach was an interesting case. Hashaliach sha'asa shlichuso, balabayis ma'ol. Lo asa shlichuso, shtecha. Also listen to this case. A shaliach, let's say again, I go ahead and I give my shaliach money. I give my shaliach money, and what happens? It turns out that it's hektish money. I made a mistake. I didn't mean to give him hektish money. I made a mistake. My money's got, I have 2 wads of $100 bills. Who doesn't? Right? And I accidentally took my hektish wad instead of giving my chulin wad. And what happens? I give it to the shaliach. I ask him to go out and to buy me a particular item. Go out and buy me something. And what happens? He goes ahead and he does it. So if he follows through on the shlichus, balabayis mal, then I the balabas, I am responsible for the me'ilah, for the misappropriation of hekdish funds. However, again, if the shaliach deviates from his shlichus, right? So if I told him that I want you to buy me a new sofa, and he instead buys me a dining room table. He has deviated, it was on sale. He deviates from the shlichus, then lemais again, in that case, the shaliach has committed me'ilah. So the Gemara says, so listen to this. The Gemara asks, I don't understand. So let's say again, I told the shaliach to go and buy me a sofa. He buys me a sofa for the hektish money. So what's the halacha? I, the balabas, have committed me'ilah. So how could that be? If the shliach does his shlichus, why am I committed me'ilah? But I will say at the end of the day, remember again, who committed the act of me'ilah? Who committed the act of me'ilah? The shaliach. Right? As much as it's my money and I made the mistake, I didn't commit the act of me'ilah. It's the shaliach who went ahead and actually purchased the item with hegdish funds. So why is it because of what the shaliach did? This one is a sinner. Obviously, the shaliach doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know that it's hegdish funds. But at the end of the day, he's committed the act of me'ilah. So why should I be responsible for the act that he committed? Hainu ki hararin hatuluyin b'sara. This is what it means when the Mishnah says that the laws of me'ilah are like mountains suspended by a hair. That there are concepts in the laws of me'ilah that are not immediately understandable based on the text, but rather are based on the oral tradition. So Amarava umay kushya dilma shiny me'ilah. Dilma shiny me'ilah. The answer is laws of me'ilah. Laws of me'ilah because laws of shlichus would not allow this, right? Is in shliach l'dvar avera. So only the laws of shlichus would say this doesn't work. The fact that it does work is a din in shlichus, is a din in me'ilah. Excuse me. So what's the question? Dilma shani me'ilah dialfa chet mitruma. Maybe me'ilah is just fundamentally different. Why? Because you have exer shavav chet from truma. Ma hasam. I will say in other words, it's exer shavav truma. Ma hasam shlucho shel adam kimoso. Afkan shlucho shel adam kimoso. I will say maybe this is just an exception. And what's the exception? Just like I will say in the laws of truma. Remember again, if somebody tithes my produce somebody tithes my produce, they could tithe my produce on my behalf. So just like again, I could have their shlichus by truma, perhaps there's shlichus by me'ilah as well. Ella Amar, actually we'll stop over here. We're going to pick up. Actually, let's just do one more line. Rava said, Lo nitzrucha el chedisanya. So also remember, we're trying to figure out what is the novelty in the laws of me'ilah that makes it like mountains suspended by a hair. Ela Amar Rava, Lo nitzrucha el chedisanya. Niskar balabayis lo niskar shtech. Listen to this. Let's say in the same case as before, I accidentally sent my shaliach with hektish money to purchase the sofa, and I realized afterwards what I did. So after he left the door, I can't get in touch with him. I realized what I did. So what happens? But the shliach doesn't know. So I will say what happened. Let's halacha. Shliach mal. So shliach mal. The shliach has committed me'ilah, and I have not committed me'ilah. And I will say now, why haven't I committed me'ilah? Because essentially, at the moment that I realized what just happened, I canceled the shlichus. Now, I could cancel the shlichus without my shliach even knowing. So it turns out that when the shliach spends the money, he's not spending the hegdish money on my behalf. Whose behalf is he? Now, I don't know whose behalf he's doing it, but he's not doing it on my behalf, right? I canceled the shlichus. Therefore, it turns out that the shliach committed me'ilah. When we say the shliach committed me'ilah, obviously, the shliach is not going to be held responsible for that act because he doesn't realize that he's holding me'ilah funds. So when it says the shliach ma'al, what it means is the shliach technically committed the act of me'ilah. I, the balabas, have not because I canceled the shlichus. To which the Gemara says, it's interesting lashon. Shliach anya my ka'avid. Right? What did shliach anya means? I've never seen this. Shliach anya means what? Poor shaliach. It's amazing, right? I don't know. I've never seen an expression before. What did the poor shaliach do? Why are you making him responsible for me'ilah? To which the Gemara says, Hainu ki hararin hatluyin b'sara. This is what the Mishnah means when it says that the laws of me'ilah are like mountains suspended by a hair. That there are certain concepts in me'ilah that, again, ultimately seem to put the party who is totally ignorant of the circumstances at a disadvantage. Even though, of course, we don't hold the shaliach culpable for the me'ilah, but that's the fascinating idea that here when the balabas realizes what happened, he can negate the shlichus, and therefore the shliach is not acting on his behalf. Therefore, even though we normally have a gzer shavav chet for truma that says what? Someone who acts on my behalf, that act is misyachis, that act is connected to me. I cancel the shalichos, therefore it's not my act, and therefore the shaliach will be chai for the me'ilah. I will not be chai for the me'ilah. This is what it means when it says that the laws of me'ilah are like mountains suspended by air. We'll pick up tomorrow with Amar Rav Ashi. I'm sorry.